Guys, so let's talk about forks. What are forks? We have two different kind of forks. We have a so-called hard fork and a so-called soft fork. What's a hard fork now? A hard fork doesn't have a backwards compatibility, so this means you cannot go back afterwards. It's most of the time it's a fundamental change. So it's a fundamental change in the Bitcoin protocol, for example, and you have two totally separated chains afterwards. Everything before stays the same, the chain will be the same, but after the fork, two separated chains, and they are totally different. Some examples are Bitcoin Cash, or others like Bitcoin Gold or SegWit2x. And Bitcoin Cash, for example, increased the block size from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes, or I think they already increased it to 8 megabytes or even more, I don't know. So that's a hard fork. And on the other hand, we have a so-called soft fork. What's a soft fork? It's like an update. You can imagine it like an Windows update on your computer. So it's an update and it has backwards compatibility. You can go back always. So you can use your old client. You can still use the old client, and people can use new clients as well. You don't have to use the newest functionality if it doesn't fit you yet or something like that. So you have always the option to update or not. It's not a requirement to update, which is separate on hard fork, because on hard fork you have to use one chain or both, like you want. And SegWit, for example, is one of these soft forks. Now, what happens with your coins after a hard fork? After a hard fork, you normally don't lose your coins. So you still have your money. For example, if you have Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, when the fork happens, you still have the Bitcoins and you also got Bitcoin Cash. But you have to be really careful of replay attacks and reorganizations. We will talk about these attacks later on, so be careful with that. It's not so easy with forks, but you can still choose what you want. People say you get free money. I quoted that because it totally depends on the coin, on the market, how people are trading it, how people are using this coin, if they're buying something with it or not. So not always free money, but at least you get the same amount on both chains, and you can decide which one you use, or you use both. Example is this people that were holding Bitcoin on 13th of November 2017. They also got the same amount in Bitcoin Cash. So this was a fork where people got the same amount in the different coin. Let's talk now about these attacks. The first attack is this replay attack. You have to be really careful with that. This replay attack means if you're on the Bitcoin chain, for example, and you send some transaction to somebody else. So if you send Bitcoin to somebody else, you have this transaction. And someone could now take this transaction, even if they don't have your private key. He can take this transaction of you that you made on the main chain, on the Bitcoin chain, and replace it on another chain, on a chain that doesn't have a so-called replay protection. So be careful with that. Somebody can replay this on some other chain and steal your money, or at least send the same transaction on another chain. So he cannot modify completely the transaction. He cannot add some other recipient or something like this, or the amount. He can just replay the same transaction, which is still bad. So be careful with that. If you don't know how to deal with it, always use the most important chain, the main chain, and don't deal with other chains if you don't want to, or if you don't have the knowledge yet. So don't try out other stuff if you don't know how it's working. Nobody can change your transaction anyway, so the replay protection is just that somebody is sending the same transaction again. and it also doesn't work if the other chain doesn't have the same proof of work algorithm. So if it's totally some other algorithm or some other blockchain that isn't relating to the, for example, Bitcoin blockchain, then it doesn't work anyway to replay it. Now let's talk about these chain reorganizations, in short also reorgs. This is happening so we have the longest chain. This is always the most important chain. The longest chain is the main chain in Bitcoin, for example, and also for other blockchains. Longest chain is always the one that everybody is using, that everybody is verifying, that everybody is sending transactions and so on. And also the miners are working on the longest chain. And with reorganization, we mean that, for example, if it's done on purpose, somebody could, for example, with a 51% attack, he could, in the meantime, totally privately, if he has a lot of power, he has to have a lot of mining power, a lot of CPU power on Bitcoin, for example, to do this attack, and he's doing privately, he's creating blocks. So he is making more blocks than everybody knows of. So the other chain that is publicly visible to everybody, every node is verifying this chain, and he is doing some private one that is longer now. And suddenly he's making it publicly available, so he's sending it out to other nodes. Then everybody is immediately going to the longer chain, which makes sense because the longest chain should always be the right one. But the problem here is he had more power than everybody else, and so he could create the blocks privately, and he could do a lot of bad things like double spend and other things that are not really, that's not what we want to have. So it's not a big deal of an issue with Bitcoin, but with other smaller chains or with smaller blockchains, it's possible, and it happened already. So be also careful with reorganizations. And how do you claim now your new coins after a fork? Make sure you have your private key. The private key is the most important thing. If you have a private key, you can get to the coins on both chains on any time you want. And also, if that's not possible, make sure that the wallet or the servers you're using, that they are also allowing you to give both, that you get both coins on both chains. And if not, then, and you don't have the private key, they can decide maybe you don't get your coins then. So best case would be to have the private key. Make sure you have your private key. There are also different ways on different coins how to claim them. You have to Google it, you have to find out, but be careful with replay attacks, and also don't put your private key somewhere on some website or something else, because you never know, maybe they are trying to steal your money, it's some scam or some other thing. Make sure you really trust them and do it only if you really need it. And hope that I would not hope that they're really not doing some bad thing. Make sure how other people are doing this, if there's a fork and there are two new coins. And yeah, make sure you have the private key. That's the most important thing anyway. Can anybody now create his or her new coin by forking? Yes, you can create your own coin by forking the Git repository of Bitcoin, for example. It requires maybe some technological knowledge, so you need a lot of developer experience. And also the problem is you need a lot of miners, a lot of nodes and users. You have to build up the complete blockchain yourself if you don't choose to use some tokens on Ethereum. So you have to build up everything yourself. You also have to make sure that the consensus is built up, everything works. You have to face maybe some 51% attacks, which happen with a lot of coins, and they disappear quickly after that. The easier way, and it's also the recommended way if you're starting from scratch, is to use another blockchain which is already secure. or which is more secure than if you would start from scratch, and that's the Ethereum blockchain. I would use, for example, this so-called ERC20 token. So it's not really a coin, it's called token. It's based on the Ethereum blockchain. It's some smart contract. You can check it. We made another video for that, how you can create your own token. They are used for ICOs, for example, and this is how you can create your own token quickly without having to create a complete blockchain yourself. Are forks now good for the ecosystem? They are actually, because it increases the market value. People want to get both chains before. People are greedy. People want to have more money, so they try to put in more money. They invest more money in it, and you also get this free money if both coins succeed for sure. And if not, then maybe you will lose something or not. You never know. And you sometimes will also have new coins with different or better functionality, which is good, so you can always get some improvement out of fork. But the bad thing is forks are splitting up community. A lot of people get angry and yell at each other, and bad things are happening. Also, a lot of chaos is happening during a fork, and yeah, so the starting phase is really tough, but afterwards then it's lowering down and then it's getting better. Now at the end I still have some timeline of Bitcoin forks, so some websites you can check out which Bitcoin forks happened, like Bitcoin XT, Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin Unlimited, Segregated Witness, which was a soft fork, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, or Segway2x. This timeline of the forks, it's linked here. You can check it out later on if you want. And I hope this video now explained you a little bit what forks are, and you understand it, and you know what to do with the next fork. So thank you for watching.